My name's Jenny, and this is basically my little homage to all the DVDs that are on Blu-rays or 4K that I bought. I'm starting. Well, I'm actually starting this presentation as a homage to the films that I actually like. But because I like them, it doesn't mean to say that I agree with the actual underlying message that they put forward. But this is my opinion, and this is why I wanted to do this little disclaimer. Yeah, the actual front that these are my opinions and they're what I actually believe. I do not expect anyone suddenly to stop buying these DVDs. And actually wouldn't actually, what do you call it, be upset if they bought them. I certainly don't want actually these actual stories to disappear, never to be seen again. I don't want them to be cancelled. And I taught this because if anybody criticises a film or anything, what tends to happen is they've got cancelled. People are trying to cancel this. And I don't really, what do you call it? I learned about cancel culture by actually just finding people were talking about it before I actually realised that it was actually something that was actually sense. Uh, so I actually looked up what uh, cancel culture meant, and I looked it up as everybody does on the internet. So uh, on a dictionary in the internet. But anyway, cancel culture, according to the internet, refers to the popular practice of withdrawing support for, and cancelling in brackets, public figures and companies as after they have done or said something considered to be objectionable and offensive. Cancel culture is generally discussed as being performed on social media in a form of group shaming. Can I actually say that the people that are talking about that seem to press in the point that if somebody actually says something that is totally objectionable about an individual, etc., that that individual should keep on giving them money by paying for the stuff. And and I thought in a true capitalist, what do you call it, system that you bought what you liked, you know, and it's actually up to the person actually presenting. Anyway, uh, I don't believe in anything being cancelled. It just reminds me of book burning uh, and other things. The Nazis burnt a lot of LGBT works at the actual start of the war. They burnt a lot of trans research that put the world back, and they did. Uh, and I sometimes think, what is being lost, whether it's books, film, art, or video, it reflects of what was happening at the time. I heard somebody the other day go on and say, "Oh, Disney are putting a disclaimer, uh, basically that they don't hold these views now. They might be offensive to some people." Well, they're not actually pulling the thing. They're just actually saying what's actually about in modern society, how it might be actually offensive. Quite honestly, when they were made, a lot of these people didn't have the voice to actually say it. But to me, we live in a society that's governed by market forces. And if you actually do say a lot of objectionable things about in a minority group or even a well-liked group and they stop buying you actual stuff, yeah, that's not cancelling it. That's just freedom of choice. And I think everybody always says that in a free society you've got the freedom of choice. But when people then say, "Oh, they're trying to cancel somebody," and that they say, "No, you haven't a freedom of choice. You've just got freedom to do what I say." And actually, and then they talk about freedom of speech. I'm a great believer in freedom of speech. You've just got to realise that freedom of speech has consequences. If you say something really emotive, then I don't think you should really be surprised if somebody else who does not agree with you says something equally as emotive. You know, and are they wrong? Because you've had the freedom to speak to it. It's a bit of a rabbit hole that I think we're all thrusting ourselves down. But my actual thought is that these are my personal opinions. They are, you know, and I think when people are watching them, they should actually watch them for enjoyment, but just actually think that even though you're enjoying them, they might not be 100% what do you call it true. They're actually, even if they've got it labelled on, they're actually basically produced as entertainment and to sell. They're not produced to be a factual thing, because they'd all be like university lecturers. And while some university lectures I've enjoyed in my life, some have been extremely boring. So some of the films that I'm going to talk today about are my favourite films, and I own them. When I look back at them, they do have quite a few flaws in them, or some have. These are because of when they were made, the influences that were around to influence the person that's created them. Even society has interpreted them and motivated them to actually represent what society feels, more than actually how the actual creator wanted to see them. I would like to think that critical thought remains in this actual world. Because a film is not is there, it does not mean it's true. Loads of films are based in truth, but they make flipping liabilities. So they only speak they speak of truth. A good example is a brilliant film called Fargo. It was marketed as a true story. Uh, it, it wasn't. Nobody was put through a wood chipper, and the treasure lost in the actual snow was never really lost, because it was a work of fiction, even though people have been to where it was actually based and rummaged about in the snow looking for this treasure, because they believed that it was based on a true story. But after saying that, when you watch Pinocchio, uh, nobody actually really believes that a wooden puppet can turn into a human boy. And when I was young, there was a film. I say when I was young, I was late teens, early 20s, Amityville Horror, that came out that said that it was a true story. And uh, actually, that was the thing that made it one of the actual year's blockbusters. Well, it wasn't. Bit sad. Everybody likes to think there's loads of flipping houses infested with blue bottles and demons, but no. Uh, Now a little harder question that I'm going to actually pose to you: the six happiness. Uh, this is a film about a British missionary in China, who, when she actually arrived, she became well, she had found a favour, I think, with one of the local warlords, and was appointed as a foot inspector because she wanted to eradicate foot binding. And she actually did that, but as the political climate changed, she marched 100 orphans, 50 of her own and 50 that she'd got from somewhere else, out of China. When you watch this film in the West and having no actual comprehension of culture, etc., you watch it with a Western point of view. does that mean it's actually right? I think it most probably was, because foot binding was a terrible thing. But I also wonder if somebody in China would actually get the same intent from it. But it is an actual a way of influencing, is why I wanted to actually uh, talk. And I think when we watch films, we should be a little bit more critical of what they're actually trying to say. After saying that, what do you call it? I enjoy Marvel films, and I'm always really happy when all the actual people win, etc. And and good defeats evil. But anyway, so now I've talked to you about looking at what do you call it in a more critical way. Yeah, let's put on a blanket expression, laugh at things that are funny, and watch them with a flipping bowl of popcorn. Because that's how films should be actually witnessed. Oh, if anybody's wondering, that is me when I was extremely young. Uh, Funnily enough, before the surgery. So the first film I've put up here is Psycho, and everybody's going to think, "Oh yes, Psycho! Yeah, it's a classic Alfred Hitchcock film, and it's all a bit of fun. It's made to scare. What do you call it? Sure, you're also looking up at the ceiling, just saying, yes, we know Norman had his dead mother in the basement and was dressing up to murder female victims. Quite honestly, the film's superb, and I wouldn't actually, what do you call it? I think it's a loud breaking film, but it's there, and I've got it. I'm going to go through a few films, and then I'm going to come to a point. Yeah, the next film I haven't really seen, but I'm sure it's another horror film, and I should imagine it's really, really good. By looking at the actual title, called Deranged Confessions of a Necrophile, it does actually look as though it's kind of, it would be something, if you enjoyed horror films, that would be actually really great to actually watch. Silence of the Lambs. What can I say about this? It's another good film. Nail biting. Anthony Hopkins playing a creepy serial killer. Jodie Foster, the naive uh, FBI agent. Clarice Starling, who's tasked with capturing a serial killer called Buffalo Bill, and goes obviously to Anthony Hopkins' character Hannibal to actually to help. Yeah, it's well, can I actually say that Buffalo Bill is actually skinning his female victims in order to make, I always get confused whether he's making a bodysuit or he's making a dress. But anyway, because it's a long time since I've seen the film, the reason Buffalo Bill's doing that is because he's been refused gender reassignment surgery, which is what I suppose open to everybody. You can't actually go through transition, so you go out and murder a couple of people and make your own facsimile, which is actually not right, and I shouldn't really joke about that. It's not actually. I do not believe that that is a good idea. And then what do you call it? And then the first one that I always thought was a video nasty Texas Chainsaw Massacre with Leatherface in it. It was banned, and I think it was banned as a video nasty at one time. It was actually granted a license by Camden London Borough Council. I watched it once. I must admit I would not own this because I don't actually like it, but it's more a case of not the reasons you'd actually expect. It's something about certain aspects of the story deeply disturb me and make it not fun for watching a horror film. And come on, I think watching a horror film is that kind of thrill thing. It basically does say it was marketed as a true story. It wasn't a true story. It was falsely marketed as this. And then we come to Ed Gwynn. This is kind of based on a true story. I've never watched it, but after saying this has something in common with both Psycho, Deranged, Silence of the Lambs, and Texas. I said Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And what they've all got in common, you'd be surprised to know, is they're all based on Ed Gwynn. They're all based on him. So you've had a representation of different movies, all presenting trans or gender fluid people as sexual predators. So that is 5 films. If you watch them, none of them bear any relation to the next one, because you couldn't say watching Psycho about somebody that runs a motel will be anything like actually Silence of the Lambs. And they're all based on one person. So it's basically one. It's representing one person that they're actually based on. And it's basically multiplying the thought of sexual trans serial killers by 5. I wonder why society decided to do this and actually reinforce it by making multiple films about the same killer. Recently, I viewed a list on the internet of proposed trans women killers. Basically said that, oh, there might be trans women dying, but there's a lot of trans killers, and I think it was about 12 in the UK. And so I actually went through to read and I think about 2 or 3 of them were, one of them definitely was out of the mind on crack cocaine when they actually did it. So it was drug related. I think the other one was drug related that was actually, you could say, was trans motivated. And so it wasn't because they were trans, it was because they were high on actual drugs, which would deem more that you shouldn't really be selling crack cocaine, because anybody can have crack cocaine, and people have had crack cocaine and actually murdered and done other things with crack cocaine. So that, then 4 of them were transvestites, which is a sexual fetish and not and basically if somebody's a transvestite, they're normally heterosexual, married, and actually are not living as a woman, which is the article is implying that. And then the others all have paranoid schizophrenia. And can I actually say that if you basically want to transition, you go, etc., you see a general psychiatrist first to say that you're not suffering a mental illness, i.e. schizophrenia. You know, so it was just a bit like, I've just read 12 things and not one of them are proving your case, but because you're relying on people's ignorance, you're just expecting to say these things with misinformation. You are. So and also when you actually watch about Ed Gwynn, whether he was a, what do you call it, a trans woman is questionable, because A1, he was basically, if you go by Psycho, dressing in his dead mother's clothes, but that doesn't actually say that he was actually living as a woman or wanted to be a woman. If you go by the other 2, they were actually they were sewing up skins and putting on, which doesn't really seem the adequate dress to go into an actual to pass as a woman, quite honestly. And quite honestly, because even though there's a little bit of mention, there's nothing that actually says that. I mean, one thing all the actual stories are pretty convinced on, that the person was a cannibal. And then if you actually look with what they call it, you could say, oh, well, what they call it, oh, all trans people are cannibals. But then again, Jeffrey Dahmer was eating the people that he was actually killing, and he wasn't trans. And that is an argument like flipping penguins cannot fly. I cannot fly, therefore I'm a penguin. No, I'm not a penguin. It's as simple as that. Uh, so my problem is not whether they're good or not. It's just that when I look about now and people are screaming that all trans people are sexual predators, well, look at these films. What are these films saying? Yeah, they're saying all trans people are, what do you call it, are serial killers and sexual predators. So I move on to, what do you call it, and Michael Caine, who's actually playing, it's a film about a cross-dressing uh, killer. But if I remember rightly, it's a film really more about a transvestite than actually somebody that is wanting to live as a woman, because after he's killed, etc., he flipping uh, basically lives his life as a man. It's not that he's one certain type of people. I did actually hear an argument here that, what do you call it, that trans people that actually are murdered or commit suicide are not that great, and that's because there's not a lot of them in the general population. But the same actual argument's not put that trans people are sexual predators, because it'd be a very small number in the actual general population, but it's just a drama, actual saying that every trans person is a sexual predator, which is absolutely ridiculous. And also the actual fact is, I think you'll find that they're not, and I think you'll find that not every person that cross-dresses that's heterosexual is actually a killer. Wire in the blood. You see, I'm flipping, this is me, what do you call it, I love Robson Green. I do. I enjoy doing Soldier Soldier, and Wire in the Blood I like, and there's one I can't remember where he plays another policeman. Really do like him. Why I've put Wire in the Blood is because the first episode, the first series, which this is a actual the first series cover, is about, now spoilers if you haven't watched it, and I do recommend you do watch it. The first story, Mermaids Singing, is about a serial killer who's actually, well, for the time of day it was written transsexual, which means basically transgendered. Had an actual operation and got caught with it, so goes around and actually is looking for the perfect partner, man, and he's just actually murdering anybody that doesn't live up to these standards. I think that's the story. I only watched it once because it was, to me, another cheap story where we just actually put the poor trans person out there as being a serial killer. Yeah. But that always surprised me, because, it's always good to actually slag off most people that's trans, even if you believe they're actually deranged killers, which always made me think, isn't that a bit strange? So now, one of my favourite films, and I should imagine a lot of eyebrows are being, what do you call it, raised. There's lots of other music in this, so what could be wrong with it? It's because it blurs the line. You've got 3 drag queens and 1 trans woman, but watching the film, there's no actual difference, and there is a difference. I think it's more a case of, it's actually proving, it's blurring the actual lines. It's if you put a dress on, you're trans, which is not the actual case, if you know what I mean. Because somebody, in fact, actually, when I get to the next slide, there's a nice way put there. But can I say that it's high on my list of actually owning and watching? I think this is a fantastic film. Yeah. And it also shows a lot of the difficulties of being basically a drag queen. Right. This one, I've got very muted feelings, because like I say, I don't think I've got valid reasons. It's just a film about three drag queens trying to go to an event. I can't remember what the event, and they get stuck in a small town that is basically homophobic, and they actually kind of, it's a feel good film. They kind of sort it all out. Uh, can I though say that Wesley Snipes basically turns around and says the most beautiful quote anyway. Uh, and he says, when a straight man puts on a dress and gets all his sexual kicks, he's a transvestite. When a man is trapped, is a woman trapped in a man's body and has a little operation, he is a transsexual. Remember the time this was made? And when a gay man has way too much fashion sense for one gender, he is a drag queen. Now, can I actually say, apart from the actual fact that when I had gender reassignment surgery, I was classed as a transsexual, and I think just as much as what do you call it, as representation in movies may have coloured people's ideas, I think this actual term did. But then again, I think it was actually made by doctors and what do you call it, and the press. Yeah, because it sounds as though somebody's actually changing the sex. They're changing their gender, or they're living to be more comfortable with their gender identity. Yeah, everybody knows that it's impossible to change one's sex biologically. You know, even, well, I say everybody knows. A lot of these people that actually talk about trans as not trans don't seem to realise this, but that's the way of the world. So I've I haven't really got a thing to say that it changed, what do you call it. Uh, I wanted to put it in because of that quote. It most probably does blur the lines in the fact that it feels the need to actually make a differentiation between drag queens, transvestites, and transsexuals. Where if it had just been about, but I do like the actual quote. Now, the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Uh, I can remember in the 70s going multiple times in the West End to see this show. One of the theatres was on the outskirts when I first saw it. It looked more like an actual cinema than a theatre, and then it moved to the Criterion Theatre. People were not going dressed in drag, and for ages I could sing all the words off by heart, and I did a lot of the time, which is unpleasant for a lot of people because I'm totally tone deaf. But it's on my list for a really valid reason. Unfortunately, it is. But after saying that, I still think everybody should own a copy of this musical. Why? Because it's full of catchy tunes. Yeah. And it's got a really good spoof plot. And if you just actually accept it as a musical, then great. Yeah. Because, well, first, the catchy tunes, if I actually draw everybody's uh, attention to the song Sweet Transvestite, and he sings, I am just a sweet transvestite from transsexual Transylvania. Aha. I've got no problems with the actual song and being from transsexual, if you know what I mean. And that was the syntax that was used in the 70s 80s and 90s and early 2000s. So I don't really mind that flipping trans women have been, or in this case, transsexuals. And especially because at the time, even though I hadn't made moves when I was watching this, that's what I actually was. But the problem I've got with the song is it blurs perception. It makes it sound that being transsexual and being a transvestite is the actual same thing. When being a transvestite is more of a sexual thing because it's a transvestite is actually about biological sex and reproduction. You know, it's a fetish. While being a transsexual is about one's gender identity, which most people say, people that don't believe in trans women don't say this, that the brain develops its sexual identity actually in the womb. And these are two entirely separate, different things. You know, they really, they really are different. I had got some nice little flipping things to actually say they're different, look at this and they're different, but that's just actually going against people's flipping what they actually believe. The plot of the film also is a spoof horror, which pokes fun at Frankenstein, vampires, and sci-fi movies. And the story starts really quite good with a couple, Brad and Janet, breaking down. They see a light song over at the Frankenstein place, and they go to get help. When they get there, they basically are very straight-laced college students that will be counted as squares if you actually went into that actual ideology of the 60s, etc. And or nerds if you went a bit, what do you call it? And when they actually walk in, they're met by Riff Raff and Frankenfurter, who Frankenfurter is basically in this picture, and they want to use the phone. I don't think they're ever allowed to use the phone, etc. Yeah, and throughout the course of the film, they used to Eddie, who was being kidnapped. Yeah, and basically it was a delivery boy. And on the stage, I can't remember in the film, but on the stage, because I saw it more on the stage, it was always kept in a fridge freezer. And right at the end, they threw a packet of sausages out, and I think was murdered to actually in Frankenfurter's early attempts to make himself a man. And the culmination of the film is he has made a man, but the actual fact is that he's kidnapped and murdered somebody. So it's also showing people that you come from transsexual Transylvania as serial killers or see nothing wrong in that. It also because he's what do you call it? I think he's part way in the film corrupting Brad. Janet's definitely corrupted. That it's showing that he's a sexual predator, and we go back to, if we look in society as it stands now, saying all trans people are what they call it, is it because of subliminal messages coming through with films like this and with actual these cheap shock horror films? But if you watch it knowing it's a spoof, knowing it's not to be taken seriously, knowing what they call it, it's a damn good musical, and I would not want to put anybody off. In fact, I think everybody should actually own it. Now, Coronation Street, what can I say about this? It's even had transgender representation, and I'm not going to protest about Haley being played by a biological woman because I've got no actual problem with that at all. No problem. Because Haley's character, to me, yeah, if an actor's good at their actual craft, they should be able to play anybody. And so, and if they want to, I don't see why they shouldn't be able to, and that's if they're a good actor. I mean, if they're a crap actor, then flipping, no, I mean, they got right to what do you call it. And also, I don't see why trans people have to actually just play trans parts, or LGBT gay people just have to play gay parts, which doesn't want to call it. I mean, I once heard Michael Caine actually talk in the first two films when he went to America. He did was California Suite, where he played a gay man and Dressed to Kill, which he did relate to being gay. Can I actually say that Dressed to Kill more was not about being gay? And so, but he was more talking about the attitude that the Americans had with somebody from Britain. But I have no problem in him playing both those actual parts. Like I said, I've got no problem with gay actors playing straight men, or lesbian actresses playing straight women. If they're good at what they're actually doing, if they can carry it off, good for them. What upset me about Haley's was, she was written as a comedy angle and was supposed to be in only a couple of episodes. And when she became popular, Roy, who they presented as being a capable businessman, but he was also portrayed as being the village idiot. When they actually did that, it was kind of this thing that if you're actually trans, nobody would ever want to be with you, and yeah, the only person she could get is the person that was basically who was being portrayed as a comedy flipping simpleton on the actual show at first anyway. And so that always actually bugged me, and that is why. And they also held they had a debate in Parliament on Haley's character. But what I'll tell you why I've got this up, and what really did actually bother me was that I went to Greece on holiday while I was transitioning, and on the plane it showed the best of Frank Skinner, and one of his guests was the actress that played Haley, and lo and behold, this was so flipping exciting. Oh yeah. He basically threw every bad taste stereotype joke about trans women at her, and she just went along with them, you know. And to me, if you're going to play somebody that's trans, just don't put up with it, if you know what I mean. Yeah, it was all, oh, we'll have a good laugh about this, what do you call it? So if, of course, in the debate, because I don't think having a debate in Parliament did any good anyway, but with politicians, because I think we're still a minority and we're still peaked on, yeah, all these years later. Uh, at least don't flipping, curtail to vulgar flipping jokes, that ridicule trans people. That was what I actually why I've got this up more than anything else. And don't play a character that's actually married off. This is one of the reasons why it also hurt me. When I actually first had the actual, when I was going through the transition, I had two friends, one male, one female, and they were what they call it, and both of them said, "Don't you worry, you'll never get anybody when you when you actually go through the transition." Yeah, and so it is reflected. Now, League of Gentlemen. This is another one, and this actually is. I have. I was going to say every episode. I don't have the new kind of comeback series they did, but I own them. I like them. I think it actually suits my sense of humour. because it's dark, it's very, very funny. I love This Is a Local Shop. I can see why people love it. I don't even mind Pauline's Pens. Now, I must admit, there was two things that were thrown from me when I was transitioning. I was working, and I was working in the NHS. One person who also loved this program, and I think they threw two things at me. One, I think, shows appropriateness, and one doesn't. The one that was appropriate was I was a nurse, and everybody knows that if you're a nurse and you leave your pen laying about, you will not have a pen, you know, if you've got a nurse in the actual place. And so there's a character called Pauline who used to be really guarded uh, uh, about the pens, Pauline's pens. So that got quoted, which is all right. But there was another character who was actually spoke with a very deep voice, and my voice is one of the things that I can't do a lot about, unfortunately. But apart from having an operation, I'm never going to be able to lower my voice now. I'm actually quite old. I don't think there's much point in it anyway. But there was a character in it called Barbara who drove a taxi, and she actually talked in a very male voice. You used to just have a picture of her arm where you used to see all the hairs on her arm, etc. And she used to, a lot of the time, talk about intimate details about how they messed up her operation, etc. And I used to come into work the day after, and I used to have the sketch quoted to me, and it wasn't the actual person's fault. They just didn't realise that it was actually hurtful. And later on in life, they did discover, and they actually apologised that it was. And so I've got no qualms who were doing it, but uh, the point I want to leave is that Pauline's Pens was funny. I never actually what they call it. Quoting Barbara to me was a bit too near the bone and hurtful. So when people are watching something, yeah, just have in mind how it will affect, if you're quoting jokes for it at that, the actual person that you're talking to. So I think that's basically it. I hope you've actually enjoyed this, and I'm going right back to please watch more, watch all these films, Even if you decide to watch Deranged, just let me know if it's any good. Yeah, thanks for listening. Bye.